Council meeting to order. If you could all stand for a moment of silence. Thank you. If you could turn and face the flag for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May be seated. Start with the roll call of council persons. Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Lehman. Here. Hodak.
Here.
Cassidy.
Here.
Baker.
Here.
Hall.
Here.
Mendoza. Here. Lake.
I'll move to excuse Councilperson Lake.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Mendoza, a second by Baker to excuse councilperson Lake. Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Lehman.
Yes.
Hodak.
Yes.
Cassidy.
Yes.
Baker.
Yes.
Hall.
Yes.
Mendoza.
Yes.
Does pass. Minutes from the previous meeting.
Motion to approve.
All right.
Second.
We have a motion by Lehman, a second by Mendoza to approve those minutes. Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Lehman.
Yes.
Hodak.
Yes.
Cassidy.
Yes.
Baker.
Yes.
Hall.
Yes.
Mendoza.
Yes.
All right, they do pass. Any communications?
We did have a public hearing for the CHIP grant program at 5:45 today. And we will have another one, if you mark it on your calendar. It will be scheduled June 4th at 5:45.
4th, 5:45.
Correct. That's all I got.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Report of the committees, the Finance Committee,
No, nothing new to report.
Okay. Public Affairs Committee,
Nothing new to report.
Law and Ordinance Committee.
The Law and Ordinance Committee will meet again Tuesday, April 16th at 5:15 here in Council Chambers.
Okay, thank you very much. On to officers' reports. Mr. Mayor.
Next Monday will be the total solar eclipse. We are in the direct pathway of it, so we anticipate a large influx of people. I would just ask that everybody be patient and be courteous, especially on the roads with the number of cars that will probably be here. Also, be safe. Please use only the qualified glasses to look at the eclipse. Otherwise, you can burn your eyes and you won't even know you've done it. And it cannot be treated. So be very careful when you're looking at the eclipse. Also, I would ask the council pull the landlord and tenant rights legislation off the table and consider voting on it tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Safety Service Director.
I think, Mr. President, first of all, I don't know if you've been out by Fountain Cemetery, but the folks from Great Lakes have finished the arch, and we had money left over. They were able to work on the boat and the little dock that's right there beside it. And enough then that we had them look recently at the old mausoleum that was built in 1916, and they're going to start to work on sealing that. We're going to try to get that buttoned up as our next project in the cemetery. And so there was, I think, around 15,000 left over where they could start to work on that. And they've already started on it. So that's the next project. Last week I was in Columbus for Ohio Safety Congress, and that gives us a 3% discount on our BWC costs. And learn quite a bit of things we can put into play here in town. And so that was quite a thrilling week down in Columbus to have that done. And yes, that is where I got this delightful haircut. Thank you. And we had, Mayor and I drove last week on these streets that are in the ordinance as far as asking for one-sided parking. So and also had long conversation over today and last week with Richard from the street department. So we'll be working on that for the next law and ordinance committee meeting. You know, I talked to Richard maybe about breaking out the stop sign ordinance as a separate one, because we know he had that request from some neighbors down in that area of West Haven and Summit Street for those stop signs on Elmhurst and Augusta. So maybe break that out as a separate piece and continue the conversations about some of the other streets. Have a handful of ideas where we might be able to make some things work. So we'll revisit that at the next Law and Ordinance Committee meeting then. All right, that's it for me.
Mr. Safety Service
sir.
Director, question. Getting back to the cemetery, isn't that mausoleum the responsibility of the deceased members' families? I was under the impression that that was a non-city facility, really. And I was under the impression, because I've got some ancestors out there, that it was family responsibility to pay for any maintenance.
We'll check into that further then. We had them out there, so we had the opportunity for them to take a look at some of the issues that was going on with the mausoleum, but at least we know the things that need fixed there.
Well, I appreciate that, but at the same time, I hate to see the city spend money that is not really required to.
Yep. It's a good point, Greg. We'll certainly look into that.
Okay.
Get back with you at the next meeting. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Director of Law.
Thank you. I handed out to everyone the annual report from the Tiffin Fostoria Municipal Court for 2023. Breaks down all of the different types of cases from all the different agencies, the monies that are paid to the different jurisdictions. So take a look at that, review that. Let me know if you have any questions, and I can go to the court and get you any answers that you need. And other than that, if anyone wants to, if you want to untable any of the two tabled ordinances, we'll just need a motion when we get to that point. And otherwise, I think that's all I have.
Thank you. We will move into the public portion of the meeting. This evening, we had one person request time to speak. Ms. Tyson, if you'd like to approach the dais and speak, and after that, we'll do the rest of the public portion.
I want to thank everyone for showing up tonight. I also would like to mention that I just saw where, I don't know if the city can do it or not, but New Hampshire has passed a bill that stops landfill permits. So I don't know what the city does, but whatever they do, if that's something that they need to have an ordinance or whatever, it reads, New Hampshire passed HB 1620 that stops all landfill permits until 2028 because they were getting half of their waste from out of state. It also states that we get over 2 million tons at our single landfill here in Seneca County, and 98% of it is out of state. So, if there's anybody that can come up with a way that we can do it, I know we're still waiting on Senate Bill 119, but in some ways we don't need to wait because we know that somebody else is going to be doing as much as they can do anyway. And my other thing is I was going to bring, changing the point, I was going to bring up about my point that I brought before. I know we haven't had no committees, but, and this might be public affairs more than law and order. But I would like to see where residents that can't make it here, I mean, we have a lot tonight that are here, at this time, and they have a concern, that they could seek out one, perhaps two, or they could take a combination of whoever's around here with one council member and go to wherever it is, daytime, weekend, whatever, and then the council people would bring it back and we would look at it at that point. Because I think we need to keep including the community more. We get more cooperation, least resistance, and we have a cleaner community and a happier community. And that. And anybody wants to see me after the meeting, I got it all wrote down here. Any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Tyson. All right, this time, the meeting is open to anyone else from the general public who wishes to speak. We just ask that you sign the register with your name and address. Tell us who you are and your address, and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Jill Filliater, 402 West Culbertson Street. I want to first thank Mayor Manel for clarifying. The last year, I've been looking at the charter as it's in totality, and it jumps into the ordinances. So when I'm saying that you're in charter violations of Park and Rec, you're in actuality only an ordinance violation. Ordinances are really considered a minor misdemeanor if it's violated, if it's enforced. However, there's no penalty for the ordinance of Park and Rec Board. So it's really only if a citizen would make a complaint and say that you're not following it, has it any meat to it. The reason I'm here talking right now, though, is you're repealing it, which is your right to do. But what are you putting in its place? Have you all looked at that ordinance where it says that all the decisions for the pool, the parks, is on that board? And if you don't have anything to substitute it with, you're not doing the citizens proper. So if you're just going to repeal it and have nothing, which currently we do have nothing, because in 2022, which you guys did go through and do a new ordinance update for composition, it was supposed to be implemented too sweet. It didn't get implemented. So I just am asking that you actually look at it, come up with a rational plan that is a sustainable plan that follows the ordinance. A prime example, just like Mr. Cassidy brought up, it's wonderful that for the cemetery, utilizing funds, knowing that it's not public mausoleum, if that indeed is the case, is a misuse of our funds, and we should have known that before we started the project. And that's a prime example of if we knew we can't start projects unless we had the board discuss projects, Park and Rec's example, then we would have done our due diligence to make sure it was done properly to begin with to avoid the problems with it. The last thing I have is talking about the changes you want to do to the upcode of this one that was put on for today, the new international with the new updates. Can someone share with me what year we're going to be looking at? The old update was a 2009 version of the international. Are we using a 2020 version, a 2019? Because if you start looking at that, right now you have tabled your landlord. I do not have any rental properties. I'll say that right up front. But you tabled it because you had questions. When you look at this international paperwork and the fine signatures with it, it's almost like a workaround from what I see. That's how, just by looking at it. I'm not a lawyer. But you need to really make sure that you guys have done your due diligence, read what they're looking for the upgrade, and make sure that you know what you're actually voting, because you are the council. You represent us as the citizens. The mayor gives his suggestions. You guys have to make your due diligence. And I don't know, when I looked at it, I don't know what year we're looking at for the updates. I'm hoping it's at least the current one. I think it's what, 2020? 21. Okay. I'm hopeful that we are at least looking at it, but I don't know if anybody here at this table right now has really had an opportunity to look at it yet. Thank you.
Hello, Bill Sayre, 301 South Main Street. Reiterate again, I really don't want to be here. I'd rather not. do need to just going to talk about one thing prior to the main thing I came here for, just because a neighbor had asked me to ask you guys about it. I talked about it prior, but it's been years ago. The street sweepers. We're going to have a lot of rain coming in. There's several areas, and this is actually on College. Ms. Brandenberry brought up to me, and we raked it out, but one of the sewers gets clogged, and then it ends up, a lot of the houses in that area end up getting water in the basement. If there was any way, shape, or form, I know we're talking about doing one-way streets, to put out a street sweeper schedule at all, so people know to move their damn vehicles, it would, the street sweeper is very ineffective if a bunch of vehicles are parking along the edge of the roads. So it's something that hopefully can get discussed. If that were communicated to the town, I think it would go a heck of a long ways in improving the sewers and everything, just because they end up getting backed up a lot. The main thing that I came here for was to discuss the landlord-tenant rental registration, whatever it is being called right now. Bring up the same thing I brought up the last two meetings. When Mike had put it online for feedback, over 80% of people on that online were saying it's not a good idea. I know this is a new version and it's not that exact version, but it's still right along those lines. And there's questions with it. It's just not clarified enough to where it could cause issues. If there are complaints, is there time to remediate those complaints? Is that something that you're given time to remediate the complaint before it's automatically you're getting inspected? I don't know. I don't know if you guys could tell me that. It has some other odd stuff in it, which I had brought up prior. CO2 detectors. Why would you need a CO2 detector in a house that's all electric? I took some science classes. You're pretty unlikely to have a CO2 problem if it's an all electric house. And something else I wanted to bring up, because I talked to several other landlords. Other landlords are afraid to come in here. They're afraid because they're afraid to make a target. That's a thing that I've discussed with multiples guys. It's never quite made sense to me. I brought it up to the judge before with certain issues. If I were to rent a car to someone and they wrecked it and crashed it, that's on me. No, that wouldn't be that way. So why do we have it? The zoning in and of itself needs looked at of how the process is done, in my opinion. And the other thing is, I really, really do think, and you had a packed house when they did the prior, when you guys actually did a public hearing, packed house, not a single person came up here, tenant or landlord alike, and said, this is a good idea, let's move forward with this, but yet here it is again. So what this is going to do is increase housing costs in an area that's already rapidly increased, and it's not a good thing. It doesn't help the lower income people. And you can't find, I don't know if anyone actually looked up where you found where these sort of things improved housing in another town. I think it would be highly unlikely. I'm telling you guys things that if you did a public outreach and said, hey, not just, hey, I had a few people call me, actually reaching out to the public and saying, what do you guys think on this? The response might be different than what you would expect. And we need to judge things. And the intentions of this, I'm not saying they're bad intentions. We can't judge things based on intentions. We have to judge things based on results. And if you see where there are higher regulations and higher stipulations and more government involvement in housing, the housing costs are insane. They're renting closets in New York, closets, for thousands and thousands of dollars. That's ridiculous. And the reason that it's like that is because they put in too many rules. And it's just that's where they're at. And there's so little housing now. If you guys want to talk about increasing housing, reach out to investors. There's 100 ideas. Just reach out to investors and it would help. But I hope that you guys will at least table this. I'm upset that Tom's not here because I think Tom was here last year. He's seen that. I think Tom would be a no vote. If you are going to be a yes vote, please don't say you represent us, truly, because we've been in here several times and said this isn't a good idea. Not when I say we, I don't mean me. I mean a lot of people. So those are the things I came here to talk about. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
I'm in favor of moving forward with it, just for the record,
I knew you-
because I'm right up to here, driving around Fostoria and looking at the blight and looking at the mess.
I know. Yeah, and I figured you would be. I've seen you vote in favor of the landfill. I've seen you vote in favor of other things. So
I did not
This is the
vote in
dialogue.
favor of the landfill, sir.
Sir Cassidy.
we can talk afterwards.
Hey, everybody. I'm Sandy Juris, and I live at 1101 Buckley Street. And down in Buckley Street, things have gotten worse since I was here about a year ago. Cars go anywhere from 40 to 60, 65 miles an hour from Culberson out north to Jones Road. That's a racetrack out there. And my question is also, has it become a truck route, Buckley Street? Because there's a lot of semis going down Buckley Street now. They've found a shortcut to somehow get out to the distribution plant to other places in Fostoria. There's a lot of semis going down Buckley Street. I don't know if they're allowed to or not. Does anybody know?
That is not a through street for tractor trailers.
Can anything be,
They are in violation of a city ordinance, so yes.
can they put some officers down there until the truck drivers get the hint that, they're not allowed to do this?
The only trucks that should be on that street are trucks that are delivering in the city or something like that. But
Yeah.
those taking shortcuts should be cited.
Yeah, there's some big semis. And I have one other question. Zoning keeps saying that give him time, give him time. Is anything being done about the scrap yard on Spruce Street?
We are working with them. But it's a slow process.
Years?
I don't know.
That's sinful.
Yep.
You
It's-
can't even,
it's-
you can't even drive down that street now.
Well, the problem goes back to the fact that we didn't have zoning in Fostoria for a long, long time, and the scrapyard predates zoning. So what we have is we have a business right in the middle of the residential section, which makes it very difficult. So we're attempting to work with them, but at the same time, he has rights too, so it's a challenge.
That's an eyesore on Fostoria.
I recognize that.
I just wondered, he said, give him time, but I didn't know if there was anything being done or not. But I also hope the speeding and the semis can be looked at down at Buckley Street. That's from Culberson North to Jones Road. Thank you.
The mayor and the chief of police have heard you tonight, so
And what?
they've both heard you tonight, so they're both in the room, so
Oh,
they're the ones that get to take care of that, so. All right. You can talk with them more about it after the meeting.
okay.
Anyone else wish to address the council during the public portion this evening?
Good evening. Joy Walters, 482 Hoover Street. I had emailed all of you about a week ago, and I heard back from one person regarding squatter rights. It is a concern of mine personally. I don't know if anybody else knows anything about it or has looked into it, but I think it is something that we need to address, especially if we're going to proceed forward with the landlord-tenant. I'm sorry, I'm not prepared to bring any information other than my concern, but I think that we do need to look into that and possibly add that. If we're going to go forward with this, at some point, I think it needs to be added. Personal opinion. Thank you.
Thank you.
How is everybody?
Good.
Hi, I'm Carl Walters, and I live at 620 Arbor Street in Fostoria. And I could talk to you about the landfill, but it's your lucky day. I won't. So we'll go on to I have a couple of traffic-related things. One of them's just a general thing, and the other one's very specific, but I'll start with the general one. I'm not a degreed traffic engineer. I don't pretend to be an expert. I just see what I see, and I'm concerned. It seems like the state and or the city, or maybe the combination, spent a lot of money putting traffic sensors under our highways so that our traffic lights only change if there's traffic coming the other way. And it seems like a lot of these are either intentionally or maybe they're just not functional. And I don't know why. It wastes a lot of time, gasoline, extra brakes to have to stop when there's nothing coming the other way. Maybe somebody thinks it's a safety issue, but by the same token, I see semis run traffic lights that they really shouldn't have to run. I mean, they shouldn't be they shouldn't be put in that situation because there's no traffic coming the other way. And I know a lot of those intersections have traffic sensors under the road. It's like, why is that light changing? So again, I'm not a degreed traffic engineer, but I would be interested in consulting with somebody that knows something about traffic and see whether it wouldn't enhance safety to use what we've spent a fair amount of money, tax dollars on to install, and then we just don't use them. So that's my first concern, and that's general. My other concern is very specific, and it applies to the section of Park Avenue, and I probably should have done my homework better. I don't know if it's H.L. Ford or Stinchcomb that runs into Park Avenue. Does anybody know off the top of their head? Stinchcomb? Okay. All right. We're going to go with Stinchcomb. Park Avenue and Stinchcomb, right out in front of Fostoria High School. There was a lawsuit in Toledo that was just settled recently where a lady got in a traffic accident because she was going around a roundabout, and the markings, the arrows on the pavements didn't mark the signage. And so she ended up suing the Toledo, and they awarded her some sum of money. But out there's a sign that says begin one-way traffic. Right below that sign, there's arrows going both ways. It's like, okay. And that's not the worst part of it is when people from out of town stop at that intersection, they assume it's a four-way stop, which I would too if I didn't know the intersection. But you have people coming out from the ball diamonds 10, 15, 20 mile an hour. They don't have a stop sign. They roll right through that intersection, and both school kids and other drivers think, well, they're going to stop because it's a four-way stop. But there's no stop sign that way. And I actually feel guilty because I didn't come up here months ago and bring this up, because I've seen it several times where kids are diving out of the ways of cars, or where people come within a few feet of having a fender bender because the people coming out from the ball diamond don't stop. They don't have a stop sign. And I just think that's a bad situation, especially where you have a ton of school kids walking. Somebody's going to get hurt out there. And just, that you don't need a degreed traffic engineer. You just need somebody to go down there and interject a little common sense in the way that traffic's regulated at that corner. I appreciate everybody, and thanks for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. At this time, we'll move into the old business portion of the meeting. The first two items on old business are tabled. If anyone wishes to untable them or pull them off or put them back on the table, you will need to make a motion specifically citing which one you would like to place back on the table.
I make a motion to put the ordinance that deals with landlord and tenant rights back on the table, with the stipulation that some of these language that has been changed would be adopted with it.
That would be, we have to have the motion and put it back on the table, and then we do any language
Okay.
things after that. Is there any desire to second that motion at this time?
Actually, the motion is to take it off the table.
Right.
Thank you. Sorry, take it off the table.
I'll second that.
We have a second by Councilperson Hall. So we have a motion to take the landlord and tenant rights off the table, place it back on the docket. By Cassidy, a second by Hall. Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Lehman,
Yes.
Kodak,
Yes.
Cassidy,
Yes.
Baker,
Yes.
Hall,
Yes.
Mendoza.
No.
That does carry. It is back on the docket. Clerk, would you read that ordinance?
An ordinance enacting new chapter 1357 of the codified ordinances of the city of Fostoria, Ohio, entitled Landlord and Tenant Rights.
This will be your opportunity to have discussion and make language changes.
I'm going to speak first because I'm a tenant, not a landlord. I think that this legislation is needed if zoning's not doing their job. The second point is that in spending a lot of time going through this, a lot of time, and I would like to thank publicly Joy for going through this and looking at the charter, the state ordinances, and we had some heated discussions on, we didn't always agree what it said, but we came to the determination that, and this is me now as a council person, I don't consider myself to be a know-it-all when it comes to city government. But when I cannot for the life of me understand an ordinance like this one, 1357, landlord and tenant rights, then I personally must rely on common sense and go what my life experiences have taught me. This piece of legislation is a mess. It was a mess from day one. It was a rewrite from a year ago, and it's still a mess, in my opinion. If we vote on it tonight, it's going to have at least 2 amendments more added to it. So as for me, I'll vote it down because I think it needs to go back to either start over or to an ad hoc committee of law and order, or an ad hoc committee to expand it, to have the mayor on it, to have some citizens on it. And if not, I'm not for it. We need to have something. I'm not telling you we don't. But the other thing is that we get the revised reversion today at 2 o'clock. I call bull, and I'll tell you why. It's been 14 days since our last meeting. Evidently, nobody's doing anything except for 2, the last 2. We did get some information at the end of last week. And I'm sick and tired of it, because how can we read this stuff, understand it, try to talk to the public? This affects 67% of the people in town. I checked with the chamber today. 67% of the homes in this city are rentals. So how can we just sit here and pass this legislation, put it on the books, and then expect the judicial side of it to enforce it when we didn't do our job? The administrative side did theirs. The mayor presented this to us. We've been working on it. It got tabled. I think we're up to Amendment 3, maybe 4. So that's where I'm at with it. I want it, but I want it clean. I want it done. I want it the way it should be. And I would really, really love to have the state ordinances put in there with the city ordinances so you understood as a tenant what we're talking about when we say state ordinance, whatever. Because most of our tenants don't have the option of go looking that up. So we have to rely on the fact that we did our job and gave this to them as a piece of legislation that doesn't have all the information in it. It's still vague, in my opinion. So you can count on my no vote. I know not all of you agree with that, but that's what a republic, the way it's supposed to work. Administrative, judicial, legislative. And this legislative side of it, I'm not doing it. Sorry.
That is the second reading of that ordinance.
I move we table that ordinance back on the table.
Okay, there's a motion to table the landlord and tenant right ordinance. Is there a second?
I will second that because I think it's deserving to have all 7 council people here to help with this decision, knowing that the passage relies on 2/3 of the vote and not majority. So I think it's worth saving to have all 7 people here to make the decision, and that's why I'll second it.
We have a motion on the floor to table this ordinance by Podak, a second by Mendoza. Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Lehman,
I had a
Question on clarification or discussion on the ordinance? Okay.
Yeah, a question on the tabling. So I just want to make sure I understand, if it gets tabled, then nothing can happen with it next time unless somebody makes a motion again to bring it off the table. Can any work be done to that document while it's tabled?
Yes.
So that maybe, if it's tabled, 2 sides could come together and then, so, okay, I just wanted to understand that then.
If it is tabled, it will reflect that it's on the third reading and it's tabled. So if we pull it off the table, it'll be the final reading of that ordinance.
Okay. But it could go through modifications,
It can sit on the table for the rest of the year if.
okay, and be modified, and then come back to the group
Correct.
in a different format, and it could be the third reading at that time.
Yes, whenever it comes off if it gets put on the table tonight, whenever.
Modifications could be
Take it
made,
off.
and it could come on the table, and then we would make a motion to approve those modifications. Am I correct?
I think they can be approved with them being on the table still, right? You can modify the actual, like it can be modified while it's tabled.
Sorry, I'm green.
No, while it's tabled, we can't.
Okay, so
No. It would be like this evening.
You can have it, you'd still have a discussion.
If it is untabled. Once it is untabled, then you would make a motion to amend, however you have
Whatever
decided
changes
to modify
place.
it. Yes,
Okay.
yes. But until it's untabled, you can work on it, but you're not making any official changes
Correct.
to
They're
it.
suggestions.
Yes.
Thank you for the clarification, and I'm sorry I held up the vote. I just want to make sure I understood what was going to happen.
So at this point, we have a motion to table this legislation. Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Lehman,
Yes.
Podak,
Yes.
Cassidy,
No.
Baker,
Yes.
Hall,
No.
Mendoza.
Yes.
This motion to table does carry. This is back on the table. When it is pulled off the table in the future, it will reflect the third reading. So any business that needs to be done to that, it'll have to be done when it's back on the back on the docket before it's voted on, or it will have to be voted on as it stands. So, but next meeting will reflect it's tabled. We're skipping the next one that's already tabled unless there's a motion to pull that one off the table. And then we will go into the resolution on ODOT. The first one we read tonight.
A resolution to authorize participation in the Ohio Department of Transportation, ODOT, road salt contracts awarded in 2024.
That was the second reading of that ordinance.
A resolution authorizing, empowering, and directing the Director of Public Service and Safety, acting as agent of the City of Fostoria, to execute and deliver to the Seneca County Land Reutilization Corporation all necessary instruments to effect a good and sufficient conveyance of parcel or parcels of land from the City of Fostoria to the Seneca County Land Reutilization Corporation in the vicinity of 161 Sandusky Street.
That is the second reading of that ordinance.
A resolution to authorize, direct, and empower the mayor on behalf of the City of Fostoria, Ohio, to enter into a joint cooperating agreement between Seneca County and the City of Tiffin and the City of Fostoria for the fiscal year 2024 Community Housing Impact and Preservation CHIP CHIP program for the purpose of addressing local housing needs and declaring an emergency to exist.
That is the second reading of that resolution.
An ordinance to repeal Chapter 153 of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Fostoria entitled Park and Recreation Board.
That is the second reading of that ordinance.
A resolution authorizing the mayor to advertise for bids and enter into a contract with the lowest and best bidder for the construction of a new airport terminal building at Fostoria Metropolitan Airport in the city of Fostoria, Ohio, according to specifications to be on file in the office of said mayor and declaring an emergency to exist.
That is the second reading of that. That concludes our old business. We will move into new business.
A resolution to authorize, direct, and empower the mayor on behalf of the city of Fostoria, Ohio, to execute an application with the Ohio Department of Development, Office of Community Enhancement for up to $1,050,000 in funds for program year 2024 Community Housing Impact and Preservation Program CHIP funds.
This is the first reading of that ordinance.
An ordinance amending Chapter 905 of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Fostoria, Ohio, entitled City Tree Commission.
This is the first reading of that.
An ordinance to amend Section 1355.01 of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Fostoria, Ohio, titled Adoption.
That is the first reading of that ordinance. That concludes our new business. Is there any need to go into executive session this evening? None. We'll move into miscellaneous business. Does anyone have any miscellaneous business?
I would suggest that the mayor, or that the president appoint an ad hoc committee to work on the landlord-tenant rights. It should be law and order. It should be the mayor. Should be the zoning. And if you need someone else, I would be more than glad to help serve on that, if you see fit.
I would also like to add that I failed to mention that the Finance Committee will meet just before the next meeting on April 16th at 5:30 in these chambers.
Thank you. Mr. Rodak, would you prefer to have a work session on this? So there can be, because I'm afraid that there's probably more than you and the Law and Orders Committee that probably wants to participate from your group of people, and if more than 4 of you get together, it's technically a meeting. So maybe we can plan on having some sort of work session.
Well, we need to get it moved so that it does become an ordinance, but there's some issues with it. So yes,
So is there a suggested proposal of when that work session would work for, I guess, the people in this room? Can't be tomorrow, we have to give 24 hours notice, but
Next Tuesday's fine with me.
that
That's
works.
how we did the last work session, was in between our two meetings.
Is this for everyone? Would this be everybody?
It's optional, but yes, if you want to participate, do you want to be at 6 o'clock next Tuesday? Works. So we will go ahead and call a work session specifically for discussion on the landlord and tenant rights ordinance for 6 o'clock, and that will be the only item on the agenda, and it is a work session, so there will not be any business conducted at that meeting. So you guys can have open and free discussion, you can argue and yell at each other. You guys can spitball ideas, and whatever comes together then at the following meetings when we can do everything as business. So next Tuesday at 6 o'clock. It would be open to the public, and I think we would allow some participation as well, because I think that's Mr. Podak's intention, is to get some voices to be heard. If it gets too out of hand, then we'll draw the divider like it's already in the room and say, okay, public, you can keep watching, but it's just gonna be council. But typically some of the open public meetings work out a little bit better for everybody in the end, so we can do that. So next Tuesday, 6 PM, Youth Chambers, we will have a work session specifically for that ordinance. You'll put that in the paper.
Yep.
Any other miscellaneous this evening? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We have a first by Mendoza, a second by Cassidy. Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Lehman,
Yes.
Podak,
Yes.
Cassidy,
Yes.
Baker,
Yes.
Hall,
Yes.
Mendoza.
Yes.
All right, we are adjourned at 6:49.